In the depths of the universe, a distant star system shone dimly, surrounded by the remnants of a once thriving civilization. The Azrics, a race of tall, elegant beings with skin that shimmered like starlight, had once ruled their homeworld with wisdom and strength. Their society was known for its advancements in science, art, and philosophy. But those days were long gone. Now, only a handful of survivors remained, struggling to keep their species from vanishing completely. Azrix Prime, their home planet, was dying. The once vibrant forests were reduced to barren wastelands, and the cities that had stood as beacons of knowledge and culture now lay in ruins. The Azrics had used up all their resources, and the planet's core was unstable, causing earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. It was a painful death for a world that had once been a cradle of life. Commander Theric stood at the edge of what was left of Azrix Prime's capital city, gazing out at the horizon. His mind was filled with sadness and uncertainty. He had led the evacuation of the last of their people, but it seemed like an impossible task. The fleet of ships they had gathered was small and underpowered, and the journey to find a new home would be perilous. The Azrics were a proud race, but now pride meant nothing. They were on the brink of extinction. Theric wasn't alone. Around him, the final group of Azrix refugees prepared for the launch. Families huddled together, their faces pale with fear and exhaustion. The elderly sat quietly, staring at the sky, as if they hoped to see a miracle. The younger Azrix moved briskly, packing their belongings and trying to keep themselves busy, though it was clear that none of them believed they would ever find a new home. Among the refugees was a small group of scientists whose work had once been at the heart of Azrix society's achievements. They had tried everything to reverse the damage done to the planet, but their efforts had failed. Now, they were left with only one hope: escape. They had calculated a course that would take them beyond the reaches of the Azrix system, into uncharted space where they might find a new planet. But the question that haunted them all was whether they would find anything at all. "We leave everything behind, Theric," said Vexra, one of the senior scientists. Her voice was heavy with sorrow. "Our knowledge, our culture, it's all gone." Theric looked at her and nodded grimly. "We cannot save what has already been lost, Vexra, but we can save ourselves, and maybe, just maybe, we can find a way to rebuild." His words brought little comfort to the others, but it was the only hope they had left. With a heavy heart, Theric turned to the launch pad, where the last of the ships were being prepared for departure. The engines hummed quietly, ready for the long journey ahead. The fleet consisted of 5 ships, each no larger than a small city block. They were equipped with minimal supplies and the barest essentials for survival. None of the ships were designed for interstellar travel, but the scientists had made modifications that might allow them to travel through the vastness of space. The ship's cloaking technology would hopefully keep them hidden from any dangers that might lie ahead, though even that was uncertain. As the refugees boarded the ships, Theric felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. He was their leader, their guide through the unknown. But he knew that he couldn't do it alone. He would need the help of every single Azrix aboard these ships if they were to survive. There was no room for weakness or fear. They would have to trust each other completely, or they would all perish together. The countdown to launch began. Theric stood at the control center of the lead ship, watching the other vessels as they powered up. The faces of the refugees on the viewing screen were a mixture of hope and despair. Some were crying, others were silent, lost in their own thoughts. Theric could see the fear in their eyes, but there was also something else, a flicker of determination. The countdown reached 0. With a deep rumble, the ships lifted off from Azrix Prime's surface, rising into the dark sky. As they ascended, Theric allowed himself a final glance at the planet they were leaving behind. The ruins of their civilization grew smaller and smaller, until they were just a speck against the vastness of space. For the first time in what felt like forever, Theric allowed himself to breathe. There was no turning back now. They were leaving behind everything they knew. But in the cold expanse of space, there was still the possibility of hope. The ships hurtled toward the unknown, carrying with them the last remnants of a once great species. Would they find a new home, or would they fade away like so many other lost civilizations? Only time would tell, but for now, they had one thing that no dying world could take from them: the will to survive. The 5 ships flew through the vast emptiness of space, their engines barely making a sound as they cut through the darkness. Inside, the Azrix refugees sat in uneasy silence, their thoughts as heavy as the air around them. The journey to find a new home was long, and every passing day stretched their patience and hope to its breaking point. Commander Therak stood at the helm of the lead ship, staring out at the endless stars. His mind was clouded with worry. The ships were small, and the resources were limited. The Azrix had always been a people of science and intellect, but in space, with so little, they were just another species lost to the cosmos. The vastness of space was a constant reminder of how small they had become. Behind him, the rest of the fleet drifted in formation, each ship filled with families, scientists, and soldiers, all of them uncertain of their future. The quiet hum of the ship's engines was the only sound that filled the emptiness of their journey. It was a sound that had come to symbolize their struggle, a desperate, never-ending effort to survive. Therak's thoughts drifted back to the day they had left Azrix Prime. It seemed like a lifetime ago now. The planet they had called home, the world they had once taken for granted, was now just a memory. He couldn't help but feel the weight of the loss, the sense of failure that had been placed upon his shoulders. As the leader, he was supposed to protect his people, to find them a future. But now, all he had to offer them was uncertainty. He turned to his console, pressing a few buttons to check the ship's status. The ship was running smoothly for now, but they were only a few days into their journey. The stars outside seemed so distant, as if mocking them with their brightness. He knew that the farther they traveled, the more dangerous the unknown became. "We can't keep this up for much longer," Vexra, the senior scientist, said as she entered the command room. Her voice was soft, but filled with concern. She had been one of the few who had urged Therak to take this risky journey. Now, even she was beginning to have doubts. Therak nodded without turning to face her. "I know, but we have no choice. We've used up every option we had. The Azrix will not survive on Azrix Prime." Vexra sighed and sat down at the communications panel. "The problem is, we don't even know where we're going. The course you said is based on old star maps, ones that haven't been updated in centuries. There's no guarantee that we'll find anything out there." Therak's gaze softened. "I know, Vexra, but we have to believe in something. If we don't, then we're lost already." The silence that followed was heavy. Outside, the stars seemed to shimmer with cold indifference. For a moment, Therak wondered if they were simply drifting through the void, their fate already sealed. Suddenly, a loud beep sounded from the navigation panel. Therak looked at it, his heart skipping a beat. The scanner was picking up something, a faint signal, buried deep within the background noise of space. "Is it a distress signal?" Vexra asked, her voice tinged with hope. Therak leaned in closer, his fingers dancing over the controls. "No, it's a ship. A very faint signal. It could be an abandoned vessel, or it could be another species." "Another species?" Vexra's voice was filled with both excitement and caution. "Could it be humans?" Therak didn't answer. He couldn't. It was too early to tell. But the thought of encountering another race filled him with a new sense of hope. Perhaps this was the sign they had been waiting for. "Prepare to change course," Therak said, his voice steady despite the rising tension in his chest. "We'll follow this signal. Maybe it's the opportunity we need." Vexra nodded, her fingers moving quickly to adjust the ship's navigation. "If this signal is strong enough, we might be able to make contact." The fleet's ships adjusted their course, aligning with the faint signal that had appeared on their scanners. The stars outside seemed to blur as the ships sped up, their engines working harder to close the distance. Each passing minute felt like an eternity as the refugees watched in silence, wondering what awaited them at the end of this new path. As the hours passed, the signal grew stronger. It wasn't just a single ship, it was a network of ships, a fleet. The realization hit Therak like a thunderclap. They were not alone. There were other beings out there, other civilizations in the vastness of space. But who were they? What did they want? And could they be trusted? Therak didn't have the answers. But as he stood before the window, staring out at the stars, a small part of him felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel for a long time. Hope. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, the Azrics would survive. And perhaps in the most unexpected of places, they would find the compassion they so desperately needed to rebuild their future. The stars outside the ship's window were now sharp and bright, as though they were guiding the Azrics toward something or someone. For the first time in weeks, the refugees aboard the fleet felt a sense of direction. The faint signal they had been following had grown stronger, and the ships moved with renewed purpose. Each member of the crew could feel the energy shifting in the air, though no one dared to speak it aloud. The unknown had always been a terrifying thing. But now, there was a flicker of hope, a thought that maybe, just maybe, there was something or someone out there who could help them. Commander Therak stood at the control panel, watching the signal grow clearer. The hum of the engines echoed through the ship as the fleet moved closer to the source. In his heart, he could feel the heavy burden of leadership, but for the first time, he allowed himself to believe that they might find what they had been searching for: safety, compassion, a new beginning. Vexra entered the control room again, her face lit by the glow of the navigation screen. "Commander, the signal's origin is nearby," she said, her voice a mixture of excitement and caution. "It's not just one ship. It's a whole colony. I think it's human." Therak turned slowly to face her, his expression serious. "Humans? Are you sure?" Vexra nodded. "The technology signature matches what we know about human ships. Primitive, but functional. They've been in this area for quite some time." Therak took a deep breath. "If this is a human colony, we might have a chance, but we have to approach carefully. We can't afford to make any mistakes." The tension in the room was palpable as the fleet of Azric ships adjusted their course to approach the human colony. They knew they were risking everything. If the humans saw them as a threat, they might react with hostility. Yet despite the fear, there was a small part of Therak that dared to hope. Humanity had always been known for their curiosity and adaptability. Maybe that would be enough to bridge the gap between them and the Azrics. Hours passed in tense silence as the fleet drew closer to the colony. Therak watched the sensors closely, monitoring every detail. Finally, the fleet came into range. Below, they could see the signs of human life: a cluster of buildings, glowing lights, and faint activity. The colony wasn't large, but it was thriving. In a way, it felt like a beacon in the darkness of space. Therak gave the order to initiate communication. His voice was calm but firm as he spoke to his crew. "Prepare for contact. Let's see if we can make a peaceful approach." Vexra quickly activated the ship's communication systems. A soft static filled the room as the connection was made. After a few moments, a voice crackled through the speakers. "This is Dr. Sarah Lai of the human colony." "Who is this?" The voice was warm, with a slight curiosity beneath the tone. Therak exhaled, feeling a strange weight lift from his chest. He had expected the voice to be cold, distrustful, but instead, it was full of warmth. He replied carefully, choosing his words carefully. "This is Commander Therak of the Azrics. We come in peace. Our people are fleeing a dying world, and we seek refuge." There was a brief silence before Dr. Lai spoke again. "Azrics, I've never heard of your species before, but I believe every being deserves a chance. Welcome to our colony. Please follow the path to our landing zone." Therak could hardly believe what he was hearing. The words welcome and refuge had never seemed so meaningful. He exchanged a glance with Vexra, who smiled, her eyes filled with the same cautious hope. "We're not alone anymore," she whispered. The fleet began its descent toward the human colony, and as the ships landed, Theroch took a deep breath. The moment had arrived. The Azrics had come a long way, and now they were on the brink of finding something they had long since lost: hope. The colony's settlement was modest, surrounded by lush green fields that stood in stark contrast to the barren landscape the Azrics had left behind. As the ships settled onto the ground, the Azrics saw humans emerging from the buildings. They were ordinary people, dressed in simple clothing, but there was something unmistakable about their expressions. They weren't afraid. They weren't hostile. They were curious, welcoming even. Dr. Sarah Lai approached Theroch's ship, flanked by several others. Her eyes were kind, her face marked by the hard work of someone who had lived through struggle but had not lost her sense of compassion. She stopped a few paces away from Theroch, who stepped down from his ship, his heart pounding in his chest. "Commander Theroch," she said, her voice calm and inviting. "I'm Dr. Sarah Lai. It's an honor to meet you and your people. You are safe here." Theroch bowed his head slightly. "We are grateful, Dr. Lai. You've given us something we thought we had lost forever." The two stood in silence for a moment, their eyes meeting, both realizing that this moment was bigger than just two species meeting. This was the beginning of something far more important, an opportunity for peace, for survival, and for a future that the Azrics thought they would never have. For the first time in years, Theroch felt a true sense of relief wash over him. The Azrics had found hope, not in technology or power, but in the kindness of another species. And perhaps, just perhaps, that was the most important discovery of all. The fleet of Azric ships hovered just outside the small human colony, their engines humming softly as they began their descent. Commander Theroch stood at the control panel, his eyes fixed on the view outside. The stars had slowly faded into the background as they entered the atmosphere of the planet, but his mind was focused on the task at hand. What would they find when they touched down? Would the humans welcome them, or would their fears and suspicions drive them away? Behind him, the other ships in the fleet followed in perfect formation. The refugees aboard the ships had been silent for hours, their faces marked by exhaustion, fear, and hope. This was their chance, their last chance, to find a new home. And now, it seemed, the humans might be their saviors. "Commander, we're nearing the landing zone." Vexra's voice cut through his thoughts. She stood next to him, watching the navigation screen with a tense expression. "The humans are ready for our arrival. It's almost hard to believe." Theroch nodded, his throat dry. "I know, but we can't let our guard down. We don't know anything about these humans yet. We have to approach carefully." Vexra gave a small nod, her fingers resting lightly on the communication console. "Agreed. I'll monitor the signal and keep in contact with them." As the fleet made its final descent, Theroch couldn't help but feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. It was his job to lead his people to safety, and now they were at the mercy of a completely unknown race. Could humans really help them? Could they be trusted? The ships touched down one by one, their landing pads sinking into the soft ground. Theroch ordered the airlocks to open, and as the door to his ship slowly slid open, he stepped out onto the planet's surface for the first time. The air was cool, fresh, and smelled faintly of Earth. The colony was small, but it was bustling with activity. Humans in simple, practical clothing were moving around, tending to crops, repairing equipment, and talking amongst themselves. It was a stark contrast to the dying world the Azrics had left behind. Theroch's heart raced as he looked around. There was a sense of peace here, a sense of life that the Azrics had not known in years. He couldn't help but wonder how long this peace had lasted for the humans, and if they had ever faced the kind of devastation that had brought the Azrics to their knees. "Welcome to our colony," a calm voice called out, breaking through Theroch's thoughts. He turned to see a woman approaching, her expression kind but cautious. She was tall, with dark hair pulled back in a loose ponytail, and her eyes carried the weight of someone who had seen much in her life. She was dressed simply but confidently, and there was something about her presence that made Theric feel like they were in capable hands. "I'm Dr. Sarah Lee," the woman said, offering a hand. "I understand you've traveled a long way, and we're happy to help you however we can." Theric hesitated for a moment before shaking her hand, his grip firm. "I'm Commander Theric of the Azrics. We are grateful for your hospitality. Our people have nowhere else to turn." Dr. Lai smiled gently. "You're safe here. We've been through our own struggles. No one should have to face them alone." Her words were simple, but they hit Theric harder than he expected. He had always seen the Azrics as a proud and independent species, but now, standing before this woman, he realized that they were not the only ones who had faced hardship. The humans, too, had stories of survival and resilience. "We've been without hope for so long," Theric said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "Our planet is dying. We've lost everything, or so we thought. But your kindness, Dr. Lai, it's more than we ever expected." Dr. Lai nodded, her eyes filled with understanding. Hope is something that can be hard to find, especially when everything seems lost. But sometimes it comes from the most unexpected places. She glanced around at the other Azric ships, now disembarking their refugees. "It looks like you've brought more than just your people. You've brought a chance to start over. A chance to rebuild." Theric followed her gaze, seeing families, children, and elders stepping carefully onto the soft earth, looking around in awe at the green fields and blue skies. They had left behind the desolate wastelands of their homeworld, and for the first time in so long, they were standing on solid ground. The humans had set up a welcome area, with food, water, and medical supplies. Some humans began approaching the Azrics, offering food and gestures of goodwill, while others stayed back, observing with cautious curiosity. The atmosphere was tense, but there was no hostility. There was only an unspoken understanding that the Azrics were not enemies, but survivors, like the humans themselves. Dr. Lai turned back to Theric, her expression more serious now. "I know this is a lot to take in, and I know that your people have lost so much. But I want you to know that we're here to help. Our resources are limited, but we will share what we have. We'll help you rebuild. Together." Theric looked at her, feeling a surge of gratitude and hope flood through him. "Thank you. I don't know what to say. We've been running from death for so long. To hear you say that, it's like a dream." Dr. Lai placed a hand on his shoulder. "It's not a dream, Commander. It's reality. You and your people have a future here. And we'll do everything we can to make sure that future is brighter than the past." As Theric looked around, watching his people settle into the new land, a feeling of peace settled within him. The Azrics had found more than just safety. They had found a new home, and with the humans' help, they could begin to rebuild their world, one step at a time. For the first time in years, Theric allowed himself to believe that the Azrics might have a future after all. The days after the Azrics landed were a blur of activity. Commander Theric and his people were still processing the relief and gratitude they felt for the humans, but they couldn't afford to linger in their emotions for too long. They had been given a chance they didn't take lightly, and they had to prove they were worthy of it. The humans, led by Dr. Sarah Lai, had already started working alongside the Azrics. The human colony had the resources to provide shelter, food, and even medical supplies, but it was clear that the Azrics had much to offer in return. They had advanced knowledge of technology and medicine, and their skills in engineering and problem-solving were invaluable. Theric walked through the newly established camp, his eyes taking in the busy scene. Human and Azrics workers were collaborating side by side, their differences momentarily forgotten in the shared goal of rebuilding and adapting to their new lives. "We're making progress, Commander," Vexer said as she approached him, holding a tablet in her hands. She glanced around at the workers, a small smile tugging at her lips. The humans are eager to learn from us. Their curiosity is a strength, and we've already shared some of our energy-efficient designs. Therak nodded. Good, but we have to be careful. We can't overwhelm them with too much too soon. Trust is something that takes time. Vexra paused, looking at him thoughtfully. You think they might distrust us? I don't think it's that, Therak replied, his voice calm but thoughtful. It's just that they've been through their own struggles. They've built this colony from the ground up. They've survived. They might feel protective of what they've worked so hard to create. Vexra's gaze softened. I understand. We're not here to take what's theirs, but to add to it, to build something together. Therak smiled slightly. Exactly. We need to prove ourselves. We need to show them that we're not just refugees looking for a place to survive. We're allies, and we want to contribute, not just take. The two of them watched as Dr. Lai approached, a few of her team members beside her. She had a reassuring presence, and Therak couldn't help but feel a deep respect for her leadership. Commander Therak, Dr. Lai said, offering a friendly nod. I wanted to check in with you. How are your people adjusting? Therak met her gaze, his expression sincere. They're adjusting well, Dr. Lai. We're grateful for everything you've done for us. We've only just begun, but it's already clear that we have a lot to offer each other. Dr. Lai smiled, clearly pleased by his words. I'm glad to hear that. We've worked hard to build a community here, and we're ready to help you build something lasting. She paused for a moment, her eyes thoughtful. But there's something more I want to discuss. We have a resource here that could help both of our species. It's a rare mineral we've been mining for some time now, and we've recently discovered that it could be used in energy storage technology. It might be the key to making our colony, and yours, more sustainable. Therak's interest peaked. Energy storage. That could revolutionize everything. We've been dealing with power shortages for years. I thought you might be interested, Dr. Lai said with a small smile. We've been using it for basic needs, but we haven't had the resources to fully study it. We've made progress, but with your technology and expertise, we could unlock its full potential. Therak's mind raced. The potential of this discovery was immense. The Azrics had always been known for their advancements in energy systems, and if they could combine their knowledge with the humans' findings, the possibilities were endless. We're willing to help, Therak said after a moment, his voice firm with determination. We'll work together to study this mineral and make it a cornerstone of both our colony's future. Dr. Lai nodded, her eyes shining with a quiet excitement. I knew I could count on you. Let's set up a team to begin the research right away. We'll need to share data, analyze the mineral's properties, and see what we can develop together. As the conversation ended, Therak felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was the kind of cooperation he had hoped for. The Azrics were no longer just a people seeking shelter. They were partners, working side by side with the humans to build a future together. In the days that followed, the combined teams of Azrics and humans worked tirelessly, sharing knowledge and resources. They began to make incredible strides in energy storage, using the rare mineral in combination with the Azrics' advanced technology. Slowly but surely, their joint efforts paid off. Power shortages became a thing of the past, and new technologies were developed that made life easier for both species. The relationship between the Azrics and humans grew stronger with each passing day. Trust was being built on a foundation of shared goals, mutual respect, and a desire for a brighter future. For the first time in what felt like forever, Therak allowed himself to believe that this wasn't just a temporary alliance. This was the beginning of something bigger, a lasting partnership that could change the fate of both species. As he watched the workers, both human and Azrics, collaborating with enthusiasm, Therak felt a sense of pride. The Azrics had once been a proud people, but now they were more than that. They were part of something greater. Together with the humans, they were not just surviving. They were thriving. The days in the colony passed in a rhythm of steady progress. The Azrics and humans were learning from each other, sharing ideas and resources. The once struggling colony had begun to bloom, with their new partnership providing fresh hope. New energy systems powered the colony's essential buildings, and crops began to thrive thanks to the shared agricultural knowledge between both species. The future, it seemed, was brighter than anyone had imagined. Commander Therak walked through the bustling settlement, taking in the work that was being done. It was a sight he had never thought possible after the destruction of his homeworld. Yet here they were, thriving. He paused by a small group of Azrics and human engineers, all of them crowded around a new energy storage unit that had been designed using the rare mineral. The engineers were smiling, talking excitedly, their faces illuminated by the glow of the new technology. It was the first major project they had completed together, and it felt like a monumental achievement. Vexra joined him, her voice filled with quiet pride. "It's working, Commander. We've already increased the colony's energy efficiency by 30%. Therak's gaze softened. "I never imagined we could do so much in such a short time. The humans have been an incredible ally." Vexra nodded. "They have. And I think we've earned their trust, too." Just then, Dr. Sarah Lai approached them, her expression thoughtful but serious. "Commander Therak, Vexra, there's something I need to discuss with you." Therak turned to face her, sensing the change in her tone. "What's happened?" "There's been a situation," Dr. Lai began, her voice steady. "A small group of humans has gone missing. They were part of a team sent to investigate an area near the edge of our territory. We've tried to contact them, but there's been no response." Therak's brows furrowed. "Missing? How many?" "5, Dr. Lai replied. "And it's unlike anything we've faced before. We have no idea where they've gone or what could have happened." Vexra stepped forward, her voice calm but determined. "We will help you find them. We've learned much about the terrain here. We have skills that can assist." Dr. Lai looked relieved but hesitant. "We appreciate that, but this is a sensitive matter. If we're going into dangerous territory, we need to be sure we're prepared. The last thing I want is for any of you to get hurt because we rushed into a rescue mission." Therak placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We are not strangers to danger. We've been in worse situations before. If these humans are in trouble, we will help you find them." After a moment, Dr. Lai nodded. "Thank you, Commander. I'll brief the others. We leave in 2 hours." The decision was made quickly, and soon the small group of Azrics and humans were preparing for the rescue mission. Therak, Vexra, and a few of their best scouts would accompany Dr. Lai and her team to find the missing humans. The journey would take them into unfamiliar and unpredictable territory, but the stakes were high. Every moment they wasted could cost the missing humans their lives. As the group set out, the sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the land. The terrain became rougher as they ventured farther from the colony. Tall cliffs and dense forests began to surround them, and the air grew thick with the scent of unfamiliar plants. Therak kept his focus on the path ahead. The humans had already shown their strength and courage by surviving the hardships they have faced on their own planet. Now it was the Azrics' turn to prove their loyalty. They would not let these people down. Hours passed, and the further they traveled, the more dangerous the environment seemed. The team encountered sharp rocks, steep ravines, and thick vegetation. But despite the challenges, they pressed on. Finally, as dusk began to fall, they found something that made the hairs on the back of Therak's neck stand on end. Tracks in the dirt. Footprints, clearly human, leading into a narrow gorge. "These are fresh," Vexra noted, crouching down to examine them. "They were here recently." Dr. Lai stepped forward, her face grim. "They didn't make it far. We're close." The group followed the trail into the gorge, their movements cautious and deliberate. The air grew colder as they descended, and the sound of rushing water echoed through the narrow canyon. But then, as they rounded a bend, they saw something that stopped them in their tracks. The missing humans were not alone. A large creature, standing almost as tall as a human but covered in thick scales, was guarding them. It was fierce-looking, with sharp claws and glowing yellow eyes. It looked like something out of a nightmare, but there was no mistaking it. The creature was protecting the humans. Dr. Lai took a step back, fear flashing in her eyes. "What is that?" "It's a Scarvok," Therak said, his voice low. "A territorial predator. They're rare, but not unheard of." Vexra looked at Therak. "What do we do now?" Therak took a deep breath. This was a test of how far they had come, how much trust they had earned. He turned to Dr. Lai, his voice calm but firm. "We approach together. We show that we mean no harm, but we're not leaving without them." The group moved carefully, slowly approaching the Scarvok. They had no weapons, only their trust in each other. They had to prove that they were allies, not threats. And as they stepped forward, Therak could only hope that this trust would be enough to save the missing humans and ensure their own survival. The Scarvok loomed before them, its glowing yellow eyes fixed on the humans it guarded. Its massive, scaled body tensed, and a low growl rumbled in its throat. Despite its fearsome appearance, it did not charge. It only stood its ground, protecting the group of missing humans. Therak's heart raced. He knew the Scarvok's reputation, territorial and incredibly protective of its space. But this was different. This creature wasn't attacking. It was guarding. Dr. Lai whispered urgently, "What do we do, Commander? If it's territorial, it could attack at any moment." Therak studied the creature carefully. He had seen predators like the Scarvok before, though never up close. The beast was not mindless. There was intelligence in its movements, in the way it observed them. He turned to Dr. Lai, his voice calm but commanding. "We don't fight it," Therak said. "We don't want to provoke it, but we have to save the humans." Vexra stepped forward cautiously, looking from the Scarvok to Therak. "The humans are clearly in danger. We can't let this creature keep them captive." Therak raised a hand, signaling to pause. "We won't force it, but we will approach slowly, carefully. We need to show the Scarvok we mean no harm, or we risk everything." The team held their breath as they moved forward, step by step, eyes locked on the creature. The humans in the creature's care, 5 in total, stood still, watching with a mix of fear and relief in their eyes. They had been trapped here, but now help had arrived. Therak's mind worked quickly, weighing their options. If the Scarvok attacked, they would be forced to fight, but he didn't want to make that choice. This had to be about understanding, not violence. The creature wasn't acting out of pure aggression. It was protecting something it cared for. But Therak knew the Azrics and humans had to make a choice too, to survive together, or to risk it all in a battle. "We don't know why the Scarvok is here," Therak said in a low voice, "but we do know it's protective. If we can show it that we're here to help, we can save those humans." Vexra's eyes narrowed with determination. "Let's try. But if it turns hostile—" "It won't," Therak said with quiet confidence. "Not if we move with respect." With a careful hand, Therak motioned for Dr. Lai to step closer. She hesitated, but he gave her a reassuring nod. Slowly, she moved forward, her eyes never leaving the Scarvok. The creature shifted, its massive body still tense, but it did not attack. "We're not here to hurt anyone," Dr. Lai called out softly, her voice calm. She knelt down a little, as though lowering her own height to appear less threatening. "We're here to help. The humans you're guarding are not your enemies." Therak could see the Scarvok's eyes flicker, almost as though it were considering her words. The growl faded, but the creature did not fully relax. Still, it stayed in place, observing the humans' movement. "Good," Therak whispered. "Let's keep moving." The humans who had been held captive were still visibly shaken. Some were bruised and tired, their clothes torn, but there was a clear sense of hope in their expressions as they realized they were being rescued. Slowly, cautiously, the humans took a few steps toward the group. The Scarvok did not stop them, though its eyes remained ever watchful. Vexra knelt beside one of the humans, speaking in low tones. "Are you all right?" The human, one of the missing team members, nodded weakly. "We're fine. Just scared. We didn't expect this. We tried to move out of the area, but the creature wouldn't let us go." Theruk moved forward to join them, lowering his voice as well. "The Scarvok is just protecting its territory. We'll make sure you're safe." "We didn't realize how close we'd gotten to its den," the human added. "We thought we could handle it, but we were wrong." Theruk nodded, understanding now. The Scarvok wasn't holding the humans hostage. It was guarding them from danger. Its behavior wasn't out of aggression, but out of a need to protect. This understanding changed everything. "All right," Theruk said. "We'll make sure you get back to the colony safely. No one will harm you here." He turned back to the Scarvok, his voice steady. "We are leaving now. You've done your part. We don't need to fight." The creature's eyes shifted once again, scanning the humans and Azrix with a kind of guarded understanding. Slowly, almost reluctantly, it backed away. Theruk could feel the tension in the air begin to ease. It was a victory of sorts. No violence, just careful, respectful negotiation. The Scarvok, though wary, had allowed the humans to leave. It wasn't a clear friendship, but it was progress. And that was enough for now. With the missing humans now safe, the group began the journey back toward the colony. As they walked, Theruk glanced at Dr. Lai, who was walking beside him. "You were right," Theruk said quietly. "Approaching with respect was the only way." Dr. Lai smiled softly. "It's the only way, Commander. With the Scarvok and with each other." Theruk nodded. He knew this rescue had been more than just a mission. It was a test of their ability to work together, to understand the world they were now a part of, and to prove that they could survive by respecting the land and its creatures. As they returned to the safety of the colony, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the landscape. The day's challenges had been met, but Theruk knew the true test was still ahead. Building a future with the humans would not be easy, but the journey was worth it. They had shown that cooperation was possible, even in the face of danger. And that was the first step toward a lasting peace. The mission to rescue the missing humans had been a success, but it was clear that the real work was just beginning. The Scarvok's unexpected protection of the humans had opened a door to deeper understanding, and for the first time, Theruk felt the weight of what they were building, something much more than just survival. The alliance between the Azrix and humans was becoming a foundation for something lasting. As the team returned to the colony, the atmosphere was different. There was no victory cry, no cheers, but there was something even more important, an unspoken understanding that they had achieved something significant. They had come through the fire together and emerged stronger. The mission wasn't just a rescue. It was proof that cooperation could overcome any challenge. Theruk walked beside Dr. Lai as they made their way back to the main camp. Her expression was thoughtful, but she glanced at him with a look of quiet relief. "I have to admit," she said, her voice steady but warm, "I didn't know what to expect out there. The Scarvok was a wild card, but you were right to trust in diplomacy." Theruk nodded, his eyes scanning the horizon. The sun was rising, casting a soft light across the land. "Sometimes, the strongest weapon is understanding. You taught me that." Dr. Lai smiled, a hint of pride in her eyes. "I think we taught each other that. Trust is earned. And I think, for the first time, we're starting to really trust each other." As they reached the main colony, a small crowd gathered to greet them. The missing humans were returned safely, and there was a sense of quiet celebration in the air. The humans had feared for their lives, but now they were home, and they knew they had allies to rely on. No one had been harmed, and the colony was stronger for it. Vexra stepped forward, her voice filled with pride. "Commander, Dr. Lai, we have something to show you." Theruk raised an eyebrow. "What's this about?" Vexra grinned. "You'll see." The group followed her to a central area of the camp, where a large structure had been built. It was a combination of human and Azric's technology, a new energy generator powered by the rare mineral they had discovered together. The design was sleek, with smooth metallic surfaces and a humming energy that seemed to pulse with potential. "This," Vexra said, "is the first of many. A true partnership. It's the first of our new shared projects. It will power everything here. Homes, factories, medical stations, everything." Therek's eyes widened with awe. The energy generator was more than just a tool. It was a symbol of what they had built together. And he knew that this was just the beginning. With their combined efforts, there was nothing they couldn't accomplish. Dr. Lai stepped forward, her voice soft but filled with pride. "This is the future we dreamed of. Not just survival, but prosperity. Together." Therek stood silently, taking in the sight before him. This was more than just technology. It was hope. Hope for his people, hope for the humans, and hope for the future they were building. The partnership between the two species had not only survived, it had thrived. And in a universe where survival was never guaranteed, that was the most precious thing of all. The humans and Azrics gathered around the generator, exchanging smiles and quiet words of excitement. The sense of unity was palpable. There was a shared understanding now, a common purpose that transcended race and history. They were no longer just strangers thrown together by fate. They were allies, friends, even. And together, they had created something that neither species could have achieved alone. As the sun rose higher in the sky, Therek stood at the center of the gathering, his thoughts reflecting the quiet optimism around him. The path forward wouldn't be without challenges. There would be obstacles. But now, with the trust they had earned and the cooperation they had built, nothing seemed impossible. Dr. Lai walked over to him, her expression thoughtful. "What do you think, Commander? Do you think this is the start of something truly lasting?" Therek met her gaze, his heart filled with a quiet certainty. "Yes," he said simply. "This is only the beginning." And with that, the two species, once strangers, once adversaries, stood side by side, united in their commitment to building a future together. The dawn of a new era had arrived, and it was filled with promise.